Please welcome Yevgen Filchenko from Ubisoft Singapore, who is the Associate UX Director. Today, he will be talking about the role of UX designers in the team and how to efficiently build them in the creative production pipeline. So, welcome, Yevgen. Can you hear me?
Hi, can you hear me well?
Yes, perfect.
Can you see my screen sharing? Okay,
Yes,
you
we
can.
can see it now. Yeah. You can just
Cool.
remove this window
Yeah,
on
yeah,
the
I will
background.
hide it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, you can start.
Okay, nice. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming to this talk. Today I'm going to talk about UX design and the production pipelines. And the reason why I decided to make this talk is because it's actually surprising how even nowadays people in different teams and different companies I used to work is still not always clearly understand what UX designer does. And clearly that it has some significant influence on the way how we organize our creative pipelines, and of course, like I think it's this unawareness, it's negatively influences the quality of the product in the end. So that's why I think it's important to talk about UX design and its role in the team. And yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about today, pretty much. Um, so I probably will start from presenting myself. So my name is Yevgen Filchenko, and I work in the game industry for more than 15 years and worked on more than 20 projects. I have different types of the experiences that includes game design, project management, and that's one of the reasons why you will see a lot of thinking about the pipelines and also the UX design, obviously. So Mm, I think my career started in Ukraine, and I worked from within the companies you might potentially know is Vostok Entertainment. I worked there on the games such as Fear the Wolves and Survivorium. Those are free-to-play shooters. Then I also worked in Warsaw in the company called People Can Fly on the project Outriders, which is RPG shooter, and also worked in a company called Flying Wild Hog, which is a developer of Evil West, also shooter with RPG elements, I would say. Then I also work in CCP Games in Iceland on project EVE Online. You might heard of this one. And currently I'm in Ubisoft Singapore, working on Skull and Bones on the Associate Director position. So today we will be talking about UX designer role, UX designer pillars, how to efficiently integrate UX in the pipeline, and how to integrate UX in the team structure. And starting from the UX designer role myths, because this is something that I hear quite a lot from different people. Some people say that UI and UX is pretty much the same thing. And I can understand where is this coming from, because I think for the game industry, UX design as a dedicated role is a relatively new thing. Previously, it was just the shared responsibility between other disciplines, but the majority of the designers who work on the like business applications, websites, different kind of products, I think usually they have this position called UI UX designer. And in their case, it makes sense. But I think when it comes to games, especially when we are talking about like a medium-sized game or big-sized game, it's actually quite a lot of work for each of those disciplines, and it's almost impossible for you to merge these two disciplines into one role. So that's why I believe those should be separate things, but we will talk a bit more about this later on. Another myth is that UX, it's kind of a UI designer which creates only wireframes. This is also easy to understand where it's coming from. It's because majority of the actual work that you can see what UX designer do is the wireframe. So basically, this is the major deliverable, I would say. But of course, it would be the same if you say that the game designer job is to create the documents in the Confluence, right? Because of course, like the design process is what actually important, is what's make you an expert. But then the wireframe is for you just the way how you visualize your design, right? And then the next point, which is kind of related, to become UX designer, you just need to learn Figma. Who doesn't know, Figma is basically a prototyping tool that is majority of the UX designers use it, and this is really a cool tool. But is at the same time just a tool, right? And you can learn Figma. From my experience, it could take like about a month or two for the basic level of knowing Figma. It will take maybe 6 or 12 months for you to master Figma. But of course, it doesn't make you a UX designer automatically. It's the same if you buy the photo camera. It doesn't make you a photographer just instantly. There are still a lot of things you need to learn. And the last myth is UX designer is involved on the latest stages of the production usually, which is also a common misconception that the design team, can game designers might create a design and they might even do some prototyping and maybe even implement it into the game to a certain degree. And then at some point when the system seems to be working and the game design seems to be okay, they might come to UX designer and ask, okay, now do your magic and make it look cool, make it work well. Of course, this is not the way it works. I mean, to be fair, yes, there is some magic that we can do even on the later stages. Yes, we can improve things, but at the same time, of course, like if we get integrated on the early stages of the production, then the efficiency of the solution we can suggest is a way better, a way more efficient, and we will be talking about those also next. So those are myths that I had. And also to just again set a stage here about the user experience, user designer role. UX, it stands for user experience, just to make it clear to everyone. And there is a well-known UX designer who just make a really well accurate statement of what the UX design role mean. So it sounds like UX designers focus on the needs of the player and use a user-centered design approach to create a smooth and engaging interaction between the player and the game. This is really accurate, I think. Thank you, ChatGPT, for doing that. Please don't take my job. And now moving a bit to the UX designer goals. So if I would be explaining what is the, I would say, commercial value of UX designer for the team, if I would be explaining that to the producer, then I would put it that way that, so the same way as the game wants to reach new audiences by being released in different platforms like Xbox, PlayStation, PC, in the same way, UX is for you to help to reach more player and widen your audiences. And the way we do that is we doing like user tests, or we using our general knowledge about the people behavior and the people limitations and stuff like that. And then we identify the barriers between the core game experience and the user, and then we trying to remove those or reduce the barriers between those, right? And in this way we can reach more people, and in this way the game can reach more people. So we basically widening your audience of your game. And then if we think about what are the issues that might come if you, let's say, you did your UX design not good. So there is often something that I meet quite often is that sometimes it's really hard to say how small mistakes in the UX actually influences the experience or the quality of UX of the game as a whole. Like, let's say you have two buttons. One is OK, another is delete. and now you got crazy and just change the colors of those buttons. Let's say you put red on OK and you put green on delete. So now, like, in many cases, even if the player might just automatically make a mistake and do another not correct action, it still might be not that bad. And it also, some people actually pay attention to the text, and they might actually notice that there is something wrong with the colors. So just like this one thing, it doesn't break your game, right? And you might start to think like, okay, so how many mistakes we can actually make? And this is really good questions. I think it's really individual to all of the players. And I myself like imagine this kind of a scale, which is a bit abstract and it's also individual. But I think every mistake that we do in the UX design, it's kind of piles up until the point when you reach certain threshold in the player's mind, and he's just, oh, it's too much. I tired of this game because there's too many things that are behaving not the way I expect it behave. So that's why your confusion might grow, and at some point you just know I don't want to continue. And in some point it can actually reach the maximum frustration when you say, oh no, that's too much. I'm just leave it. I don't want to play this anymore. And this could be one way of how you reach this frustration, the most critical point of this experience, right? But there is also could be that not even like 20 or 60 issues that piles up, but it could be just one or two, but really frustrating ones. For example, if in the game your character got killed and then you didn't manage to explain the player what just happened, like who killed you or what you can do to be better and not get killed next time. So all this kind of awareness of what just happened and what to do next is really critical for the player motivation. And if you fail to do that right, this might you just can go the full scale just with one issue. So that's why there's a certain number of the areas in the game that I would call them like highly sensitive areas of the game that you need to pay special attention to. And death of the player is just one of them. Now let's say we know a little bit more about the problem area, but what kind of tools we can use or what kind of approach we can take to address those. And I call this UX design pillars, but you also can call it UX design values as well, because this is about the perspective that UX designer uses when he or she looks at any product or any design. I also myself using that. So I have these 6 pillars, and this is again this is sort of my checklist when I'm reviewing design of other designers or my own design. I'm just checking like, is it good enough on each of those pillars? And next I'm gonna go by all of those pillars individually and just really briefly explain what those mean, so we can keep that in mind when we will get to the next talking about the pipelines. So the explorability, the first pillar, is about making sure that your content in the game is easy to find and easy to start interacting with this. It also has sometimes to do with the player profile, because we of course should not assume that all players likes the same types of the activities. And especially when we are talking about the big games that has plenty of different types of activities to offer to the player, we need to make sure that the player has easy way to find those those types of the content. And this animation on the screen that you see right now, this was the prototype that we did for EVE Online, because this was actually quite challenging for the player, because EVE Online has a lot of content. This well-known game for its plenty of content, but at the same time it's really hard to start engaging with that content. So what we did is creating the content browser, which helps the player to identify if I'm PvP player, so what kind of content I can get. I can see maybe some preview of that kind of experiences. And I also can know step-by-step guide how I can actually get to start engaging with this activity. I can bring another example. So this is, let's say, those are the big systems activities, something. But it also could be something smaller. It could be just a game mechanic. For example, in Skull and Bones, we have the mechanic that it's basically, you can call it wind direction. And when you sail on a ship, the wind can influence the way, the speed of your ship, and also can a little bit influence the direction, the steering of the ship. And let's say, just imagine that we would just implement the mechanic, but it does not have any visual feedback, or it's just hard for player to understand that this mechanic even exists. So they just might suddenly realize that their ship sailing slower or faster, but they cannot build the logic why it's happening. And this is one of the examples of mechanic not being explorable. That's why in our game, for example, we have the VFX of the wind, that you can see basically the direction of that wind, and also there is some your captain, it kind of reacts on that wind. If the wind is too strong, he just shows the hand that something is pressing on him too much, so it's just the ship starting to sail slower and stuff like that. So if you fail that goal, if you didn't make the content explorable enough, then the issue is that your team spent a lot of time on producing something, and the player just didn't engage with that. So you just waste the time of your team. That's why it's important. The second pillar called clarity, and it also somewhat related to the first one, the explorability, because now once the player knows about your system or activity that you have in the game, he kind of interested, but now he might face that it's actually quite hard to understand how it works, and it's hard might be to interact with the system. And of course, we need to make sure that what we design is also kind of understandable and clear for the player. But there is always the other side of the issue, because quite often I notice in the teams that when we design something that is seems to be complicated, or the user test shows that this is a bit too complicated, players don't get it, the first idea that come to mind of the team is, oh, let's create the tutorial. And yes, I guess it can resolve some of the issues, but I just trying to kind of convince people that this is not the first thing that you should think about. To me, tutorials is always the last thing you do when you fail to do all the other UX. Like if you fail to use other UX tools and achieve the goal of being UI being self-explanatory, or the player should just naturally learn the game rules just by naturally interacting with the game, and read as less as possible, or read the information in the context of interaction, but not just as a wall of text. Because you might notice that if you look at the kids in the school, the problem why they struggle so much to learn the material is because it's not at this moment in time related to the problems that they are facing. So in other words, like if you starting to play the game and now you see the tutorial, but this tutorial was shown before you actually started to face the problem, then you most likely will just blind spot the tutorial. You will not pay much attention to it because there is no yet a problem. But then if you first face the problem and you failed maybe even once, and then this is the moment when tutorials came and starting to explain how you should play, how you can improve, this is where you got your attention. This is the moment when the player starting to actually read and pay attention to things. And the example that you see here about the contracts. So this is just an example of redundant tutorial, because if you read the text, it says you can accept contracts from characters around the world to earn rewards. Like what a surprise, you actually can accept the contracts and there is a reward for those contracts. Like there's not much value in this information, right? And then you can now view your contracts in the journal on the map. This is also easy to resolve, just teaching. If you do the good self-explanatory UI with clear control hints, then the player just will find it by itself. So all these tutorial is just not necessary. This one we had in the game, and we already killed that as along with any other tutorials like that. So yeah, we should be really relevant with the tutorials that we make. Let's move to the next pillar. It's consistency. It's quite, I think, for quite many people in the team, it's usually quite obvious that the UI should be consistent. I don't like face too much of an issue that the player and the people in the team understand that. But what I also realized that not many people understand why it's really a problem. Like you see the obvious part that, if you look at this example taken from EVE Online again, this happened in EVE Online because this product was in development for about 20 years, and there was like you can imagine many designers coming and leaving, and they kind of bringing up their own way of thinking about they was trying to improve things, but also coming up with something new. And like clearly when you look at this, it just feels something wrong about it. Like it just doesn't look cool when you see all these pieces of the UI different. But the real problem is that so again, the way I'm thinking about the UI is that this is sort of a language on which the game communicates with the player, or the other way around. And if you think about UI as about the language, then when the player first starts to interact with your game, interact with the interfaces, he almost learning the language, right? And the player spends some time or some cognitive effort to learn that language. And then if on another screen you suddenly starting to change the colors, like in this case, the green color can be representing the active button, but then on another screen, the active button would be bright gray color. And if you compare those two, you might assume, oh, maybe the gray one is actually disabled state or something like that. But this is just different system, and the players just need to spend extra time, extra cognitive resource to actually realize that those are different systems. So that's why consistency is important. And moving forward, the efficiency is another important pillar when it comes to X, because like on this example that we see here, one of the recent Call of Duty games, they took the UX designer from Hulu and just tried to apply the TV streaming service approach to the game. And in one hand, what you get is now the design looks clean. It looks super modern, which is cool. But on the other hand, you have to break your flow, break your interaction in more steps. Like in this case, you have to press quick play. And normally what you assume would happen, the play starts, but it's not what's happening. Instead, you go on the second screen, on that screen, you should press start, which is somewhat confusing, and the reason there was a game design reason for that is because on this screen you can see here this is the challenges or something, and the game design goal is to get the player know about those challenges. So this kind of can encourage player play more. So it's clear why we want player to see that, but the price that we pay is that for having this screen clear is you have extra step. And of course, this is super simple example. I didn't try to impress you with this. It just I wanted to make sure that we are on the same page here. But of course, in the reality, it might be that some action that might be just 2 clicks. Sometimes we make it 4 clicks or 6 clicks. And this what actually creates the frustration or confusion, especially when this is something that player do a lot. If it's something that he might do pretty much every session. So yeah, that's why efficiency is one of the things that designers should look at. And the next pillar is accessibility. So again, this is just a quick example. When we're talking about accessibility, we usually meaning people with some disabilities or some limitations, like the color blindness or ADHD or something like that. So as the designers, we also need to try to make the product more accessible to all people. And like on this example, on the left column, let's say we have the task when we have multiple types of the contracts. And like what the simplest solution to show those different types would be just assign the color. Let's say this one is the gold contract, this is silver contract, now this is the bronze contract. And in this way, you can kind of categorize those that way. But the problem is this approach clearly is the color blindness. It will not work for these people. That's why we always should duplicate the color with the shape, so you can clearly see that this is something different, even if you cannot clearly distinguish the color. And again, this was just one of the examples, and there is a cool library of accessibility guidelines, this website down here, where you can find quite a lot of different cases. And what is cool about this is all related to games. So I think this is really useful tool for anyone. So yeah, please check that. And the last pillar, so this one I would say, so this pillar called excitement. I would say this is sort of a side quest pillar for UX designer, or like the pillar for 5 stars, because you not actually always need to do that. You not always need to achieve the high excitement of the UI that you create. Just this extra mile that you can make if you want to make your game more gamey, I would say. And this was quite a big issue for EVE Online, for example, because it's well-known game. Sometimes people call it Excel simulator. That's so yeah, and we was trying to break this association, and one of the ways to do that, so what you can see on this animation here in the middle, this was just an idea how we can present the ships in the catalog in such a way that the player can kind of compare the size, the physical size of those ships in the game, like actual physical size comparison, because this is something that empowers your feel of the game universe. There's even like the videos on YouTube where people put the 3D models of the ship, and they just make the camera fly through so they can compare the actual size of those. So if you take a look on this from the, let's say, the efficiency point of view, this may be not really efficient UI. If you just put all those ships in the simple table, it will be way easier to navigate. But that's why this pillar is not essential. It's something additional. But by making it cool, you're making your game feel more like a game. And if this is the UI that the player going to interact a lot, maybe you can just have two modes of them. Of this catalog, maybe just a 3D view, or and then the simple metrics. So that's all for the pillars. Give me a second. I need to make a sip of water. That's all when it comes to pillars. Now, let's say if how to convince a producer that we actually talking about the pipelines, that those are actually important. What might go wrong if the production people doesn't really commit into the improving the pipelines and including designers in the creative pipelines? So the simplest example would be that you it actually affecting your production, basically your production timeline in a negative way, because the mistakes that the team is doing while implementing the any game feature or anything, they will still come out on the user tests. And if UX designer is not included in the review process and is not deeply involved in the design process of those, then those issues still will come out on the user test. And subsequently, your production people will have to modify your production plans to start iterating on those issues. And instead of going by predictable timeline, you will have to shift your plans, which is of course always bad for production. And let's say even if you don't, some of the companies clearly doesn't have this opportunity to perform good user tests, and that's this also like happens. But then if you go to the release, then clearly all the issues that you haven't found during the UX review process or haven't found during the user tests, all of them will be found by the players, and they will be frustrated, and they will leave bad reviews, and your sales will also fall. So this like there is no win-win situation here. We have to think about how we can improve the pipelines to make it work better, and reduce those risks. So now we're getting closer to the subject of how to efficiently integrate UX in the creative pipeline. And this will be given on the example of the development of the new features. But before we go there, this is really a high-level, small chunk of the production chain to make it a bit more clear to everyone, like how the actual process looks like. It starts from GD, then it goes to UX, and then it goes to UI art. But in reality, it actually should always look something like that, because it's clear that it's not just a straight process that GD just gives offloads any design that he or she might create it, and now UX designer just have to live with that. It should be a dialogue. We should understand the GD goals and such, and we will talk about this a bit more later. But we should understand things, and we should be able to contribute and influence the game design. And the other way around as well, game designers might influence UX design as well. And when it comes to relationship within UX and UI art, the same thing applies. The only thing that need to mention that we usually need to try to avoid UI art directly communicating to GD. This is because in that case, you will just duplicate the work of UX designer. I just also observed that a few times already, and it's just a waste of time. Then you're starting to get miscommunication. So it's better to keep these kind of a way of communicating UI art with UX and UX with GD. And also those people understand each other languages better. And if you can see, in this case, UX designer is actually need to learn how to communicate with GD and UI art. And that's why my belief is ideally UX designer should have some experience both in game design and UI art, and then just choose to stay with UX. And in this way, that person can understand better the needs and the way of thinking of those other departments. And then also something, just also quick note from my past experience. I would rather recommend not to mix UX design with UI design. That's why I have here is UI art, because this is again, it triggers the conflict of interest here, because UX, when UI designer has this designer title, by right, he or she starting to think that he or she should be deep part of the design process, which is totally makes sense. But then this is where this conflict starting to happen, because they starting to duplicate each other's job. That's why if your team, your project big enough to have those roles separated, then I would recommend to separate it this way. But if you don't have that possibility, then maybe UI UX designer is kind of makes sense, but not UX designer and UI designer. This might be a tricky one. And now we're gonna walk through some design process. So this one will be again on the example of the feature development. We will go through 10 steps of the design process, and I will try to explain the thinking behind of each of those steps. And you also need to keep in mind that this is not ideal workflow. I think for me, it's more important to just expose you more into the thinking process of UX designers. But the actual workflow is actually might vary. Some of the steps might be skipped and such. But yeah, let's just go into it. So it starts from the creative director or design director briefing. And I also believe that the briefing should be given to both game designers and UX designers together, not to game designers and then game designer giving a brief to UX designer, because it's really important for UX designer to know what was the thinking process, what was the actual goal or the problem that we want to address on the high level, what is the background for this issue, because in this way we will get more tools and to address the issue, to suggest some of the solution that you might not even think of. And then when we go to the next step, GD, let's say GD takes this exposure to the feature, to the I don't know, to the whatever requested to be done, right? At this point, GD should create really brief exploration and create the concept of the feature in the first approximation. It usually can be presented in a way in a shape of the PowerPoint presentation or any other kind of thing. But the key here is that it should not be a huge time investment. It should be quick. The same way for the UX designer, at this point, UX not creating any of the designs, and the role of UX at this point is just to consult game designer and to give some of the potential pitfalls that we might face if we continue with those ideas, or maybe I don't know, suggest some another perspective or anything. We also can create the use cases list at this stage that will also help game designer to understand what kind of things we need and what we might need. And yeah, we might also just see how from our side, we're just thinking how well it can fit the system as a whole, because we have understanding of everything that is how the system works, of the system of UX design works in the game in general, so we can see how well that will fit and give the feedback. And just after that, I think game designers are ready to go and do the pitch and do the basically share the high-level concept with the directors. And these first three steps, as you can see, they're really quick, and the point of that is to not over invest into something that might not work or might not be even feasible or possible or something. So we need to get early feedback on the early exploration as fast as possible and get a sign off for the direction in general. And then after that, we can start doing the actual documentation work. I mean, mainly this is for game designers to start doing the documentation, which might be done in the Confluence. Also, from my experience, sometimes game designers also providing some wireframes, which is also fine. It helps for UX designers to better understand the thinking process of game designers and maybe just get some of the ideas and actually use them. But it also need to be clear that it should not be perceived that what the game designer does on the wireframe, it will be taken one-on-one and just implemented, or polished. The UX designer will create more polished version of the wireframe, because again, UX designer job is not to create just the wireframes themselves, but to design. This is slightly different. So yeah, at this point, we get the design document, and the UX designer can start working out the actual use cases. So further, I will be explaining the process based on the just one of the features we was working on Skull and Bones, the contracts. And so for you to better understand what use cases are, is basically the list of the core functionalities, I would say. It usually goes as the stating, I'm as a player, I can do the following. For example, I can read the description of the contract, narrative context and purpose. I can familiarize myself with the rewards, also have the opportunity to study each of the offered rewards in detail. I can familiarize myself with the possible risk by estimating the number of infamy points. Infamy is sort of experience in Skull and Bones that will be earned or lost in the event of failure. Or I should be able to modify the terms of the contract, add additional terms to the contract that will make it more difficult, but each of these additions term will add rewards. So those are example of use cases. And then we can, based on those use cases, we can align with game designers if all of those make sense. Maybe game designers usually they coming up with something that we are missing, which is good. We should have as full list as possible, and then we can use those use cases as the checklist when we done the final design. We can just check if it actually covers all the use cases that we had in the beginning, and then based on that we can create user flows. So the point of the user flow is, again, it's very quick prototype. It takes up to 2 days. We just need to map out the high-level navigation, and to do that, I myself usually I just starting to put them use cases directly on the layout and just it just usually helps you to understand, is it enough space on the screen for you to feed the information? You just read, okay, so this screen should have contract type icon, contract chapter number, something, and then, okay, that's probably a lot. Maybe I should cut off some piece of that information and make it accessible through some, I don't know, secondary interaction button, like get more details or something. Like in this case, the rewards details, I realized that they are not fitting the main screen, and they have to make the button so you press export the rewards. And so this is the first pass when you can just do this really quick and see if that makes sense, and check with game design as well. And on the next step, this one takes more time, because on this step we should start working out the key screens. We creating the wireframes of the key screens. Usually you can identify those also based on the feature that you make. You can see that what's important, like as an example for this contracts flow. It's clearly that it's important the first interaction with the character and the menu that you see, and the way how the contract looks, what amount of space it takes on the screen and stuff like that. But then when it comes to I don't know, any kind of a drop down list, or I don't know, some special, let's say the filtering or the sorting or the I don't know, like some extra options that might be added further to just improve the usability, but they are not essential. You should not prototype those at this stage. You should really focus on only those that okay, there is here the way I suggest to think about this. If you're thinking about the screen and you just imagine in your head, okay, if this screen goes wrong, does it completely break the whole idea of the concept that you create? If you feel, yeah, it might break the whole concept, it might break the whole flow, then you should work out that screen. But if you feel that no, it doesn't matter what issues I will face on this interaction, like it will not influence the full picture, then ignore that screen. Just don't waste time on that one on this stage. So this takes, let's say, 3-5 days, depending on the complexity of the feature, of course. And now we go to the next step, where we creating the interactive flow prototype for them, basically for the design that we are making. Figma allows you to create quite interesting interactable prototypes, so you can get the gamepad and you can just start interacting with the stuff, which is really useful. I believe it really helps for the team to better understand your idea, because it's one thing when you see the static screen and there is a lot of explanation how this should behave, what happens if you press on this button, and there's a lot of text explaining all that. And another thing when you can actually just press accept and you see what happens. So that's why I think we should include and always use the interactable prototypes as a part of the main pipeline. Of course, in the cases if you are talking about more or less complicated flows. Of course, if it's something super simple and obvious, it can be easily skipped. And also another value of this kind of prototypes is because they are useful in the user tests. And I will talk about this on the next slide. No, that will be the slide after, but anyway. So let's say we have created the interactable prototype, and now we're ready to do the internal review with all the parties, like UI artists, UI TAs, and other programmers, or whoever might be implementing the stuff that you have designed. So we need to make sure that all this feasible, all this possible, there is no major technical constraints. And if you get all yes, now we can go to the director's review. And it's also important to mention that on those director's review, the presentation should be carried by both game designer and UX designer. It's just game designer focuses on the gameplay and the experience of the player in terms of like what kind of a what kind of a gameplay we want to achieve, and how we're going to achieve that on the systems, on the like whatever related to game design. Whereas when it comes to them, how player is going to interact with that, like how he going to learn about the system, and like all these kind of things. This part should be presented by UX designer, because this is the basically the main expertise of the UX designer to think about these kind of things. So now let's say we did a presentation, all went good, design approved. This is where we go to the finalization stage, where the UX designer finally can spend extra time to finalize the documentation. Because previously we said that we're just making the interactable prototype, but we're trying to avoid making the actual documentation, because on that stage we're not expected to go to the production, and we should avoid spending extra time on like doing the documentation for something that might not potentially get a green light while during the validation, or it might trigger solid rework. So this completely just might be a waste of time. That's why we should leave the documentation only for the validated designs. And on this stage, we also can have more deep discussion with UI artists and UITA, UI tech artists. So they can start also implementing stuff, asking you questions, and you can clarify your documentation along the way. And now the last step, the one I was also mentioning in one of the previous steps about the prototypes. So the last step is clearly the user test. And we have two types of the user test in general. Just for those who don't know, it's quantitative and qualitative. And in few words, just for me, not being much of an expert of the user research, but just to give you a glimpse of what is that. So the quantitative is when you invite some big number of the players, and then and by big I don't even mean like 1,000 or like 100,000 of the players. Even if you invite like 10 players, 15 players, this is already a big group of players, because you cannot actually sit with those players and play with them and look what they are doing. You usually just give them the game and say like you start here and you shoot and you have, I don't know, 4 hours, and now let's see where you go with this. And now and we getting some feedback from this, but this feedback is mainly about identifying the issues with the game on the high level. Usually the kind of information we get from this test is that let's say on the level 2 or level 4 player feel bored, so we need to do something about that. So we know that something is wrong there. We might not clearly know what exactly, but this is could be we can make theories about that, or we can do the qualitative research to clarify this. Whereas the qualitative research is when you have opportunity to basically do this in the interview mode. So you just give the player the game, and it's actually very, very useful for not the whole game testing, like not the game as the whole, but rather like specific feature. So if you design in some screen or some system, and now when it's kind of in prototype stage, you can give the player, and now you can just give him some small tasks, like I don't know, imagine you are you just got a level up, and now you want to spend your skill points in your skill tree, and let's see how you go about that. And now you can see like how the player will be looking for the button on the interface, how he or she will be trying to find basically the action button and such. And you can, this also happening in the loud, how to call it, right? So you're trying to make the player talk. You always like, if the player feel confused, you should ask like, so what's now happening? What you considering? What is unclear for you? So when the player talks, always you can get more data, and you also of course can use the eye tracking thing to get more insights on that. And I was previously mentioning the Figma prototypes. This is also something that we sometimes use for the qualitative research. We just have the Figma prototype and we give it to the player and do basically this kind of research, and we might get some insights for this even before we actually implement that. So this also helps sometimes to save your time. And the last slide that I have here is how to integrate UX in the team structure and ensure sustainable long-term development. So this is the structure that I found to work the best, again, from my experience. So just to give you a bit of a background, um, I used to work in the structures when the teams trying to kind of break them, the experts by the discipline. Let's say you might have a team of 3D artists or team of programmers or team of the UI UX designers. Um, and this kind of in fact, when a game designer want to create something, he or she have to go to each of those disciplines and try to get the resource, and they just given the task so they can work. But the issue is that you, in this way, you just get in sort of an internal outsource company just within your company. And this is leads to some problems because first you have to be much more precise in terms of the documentation. So when the information flows between different departments, they need to understand your context of the feature you're working on and the context of everything basically that you're working on. So because of that, both of parties have to spend more time. Also, it kind of dilutes, I feel, the feel of belonging and responsibility for the product as a whole, because again, you just at some point after a few months of working in this structure, you starting to feel that all you care is about closing the task as quick as possible, and and that's it. So this is not healthy environment for the game development. I just don't think it's really efficient also. What works for my experience better is when you have different pods, and each of those pods, they are have their objective, high level objective. Could be that one of the pods has the objective to embrace new players. So they might be working on, I don't know, different kinds of tutorials or the like some cinematic experiences to impress the player the first PlayStation and stuff like that. Another team could be working on only on the new features, so on maybe related to the progression. So every time when you have idea how to improve the progression, you come to this team, and this team taking the holistic approach on that, and and stuff like that. And then each of these pods, they usually have a set of people. Not always that they should have like all kind of a disciplines within the pod. It depends on the type of the depends on the objective of this pod. But let's say if you're talking about the game systems and such, we usually should dedicate UX designer to this part, and the UX designer should feel the belonging to the product, and he or her goal should be to basically push the standards of the UX quality, be a player advocate, and then be care and just take care of the quality of whatever they're doing. So this is one thing, but then you will quickly realize that if you just have all those pods working independently, the drawback of this, they will have worse communication between each other, and you need to address this somehow because your consistency will suffer. So that's why you need the quality pod, which is the special team that usually includes all leads of all departments, at least related to the UI. And those people goal is to maintain the consistency, both visual, general interaction principles and such, the quality of the implementation, like just the way it all works. So their first and the primary goal is to review every work that is done by the pods, and the UX designers that are delegated to those pods, they communicate back with the quality team so they can just align on what they are doing. And also this quality team can run their own initiative that doesn't clearly fall under the objective of each of those individual parts. Like, for example, could be, I don't know, we need to create the codex. Who will be doing the codex if it doesn't clearly belong to any of the parts? This is the initiative that can be taken by the quality team and stuff like that. You see some examples here in the list. I will not go through all of them. And yeah, this was pretty much it. I'm wrapping up. Just some last thoughts. First is clearly, as I already mentioned previously, there is no universal solution or universally good flow and pipeline. Of course, all teams are unique, all people are unique, and you as a manager, you need to understand the strengths and weaknesses of your team and see which flow will work the best. Only you can, say which parts of the flow, the normal flow, you can skip and such. So there should not be like, there is no silver bullet for this one, clearly. And the second one is, especially when you're working on the big teams, like when there are hundreds of people, like 200s, 400s, 800s people, it's all clearly easily go to the sort of a chaos, and non-single person can control all this chaos. But what you can do is you can be clear about the direction. You can explain your values. You can also identify the barriers and then teach people to work within those barriers, but in the given direction. So you stay high level and you're not trying to control the chaos. You're just trying to direct it. So that was all. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming. We are also hiring in Ubisoft, and we even have some UX designer position open in Singapore. So please check the webpage. I also thinking about creating the UX course at some time. If you're interested, just add me in LinkedIn to just follow up. And if you have any feedback or questions, just also please post them in the chat. Feel free to send them in my email or anything. So yeah, let's just stay in touch. Yeah, thanks to you all once again. That's all from my side.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was a very well led presentation and a very nice design for it. So, yeah, good job with that. Yeah, there are actually like a few short questions before we go out on a break. So, okay, regarding the accessibility of the UX elements that you implement in the games, how you decide which exact elements you want to add in the game, like the ones regarding the color blindness or any other. I understand that it all depends on the project, but are there like maybe a set of general elements that you add in all the projects, or how do you
Yeah.
fluctuate from project to project?
Yeah, I understand the question. This is an interesting one because I think the answer to this one is also will be different depending on the team and the company. In Ubisoft, we have a separate department that is responsible for the accessibility as the whole, and this department has their own guidelines that has some list of the issues or requirements that cannot be ignored in any case ever, and they also have them sort of how to call it, the rank system for them for the issues. So let's say if you're talking about the color blindness, we have a certain rank that we should reach to basically be able to get a green light, and usually those ranks are quite high. So it means like usually we should be good in pretty much every type of the accessibility. But in some cases, if we have some technical limitation, something, and we cannot achieve like 100% in one of the area, we can compensate that by achieving like higher rank in another area. And yeah, it will be honestly, it will be really hard to give you a list of what I would add in every game. It will be a really long list. We usually they are really long. Like if I remember the presentation that we're doing in the beginning in the start of any project, and we pitching like what will be the accessibility requirements, and they are really long. So yeah, it will be hard to answer this easily.
Oh, yeah, yeah, sure, I get it. Okay, thanks. And okay. Let's see any other questions. Yeah. How? What are the most efficient ways to ensure that the UX design that you implement is clear enough for the major portion of players? And how do you check it? Maybe you have some internal tools, or maybe the focus groups, or etc.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I a bit covered that in the main presentation already. We have the user experience research team who, yes, they they usually create different type of the cohorts, different kind of the player, different player profiles. They have their own guidelines how they who they invite on the user test and how they do that. We have also internal user tests. We have closed beta. We have open beta. So we also monitoring them community feedback. So there is a lot of sources of the feedback that we are getting, and they're actually quite deep integrated in the production pipeline. So we are always looking at them, and in majority of the cases we must act on them. So yeah, but yeah, I think in the broad strokes that's pretty much the way it works.
Okay, cool. And since there is like less than a minute left, one more question. Do you believe that the AI can replace UX specialists in the near future?
I like this question. Okay, I did some exploration on the current AI possibilities when it's come to UX. So I think the closest future is that the AI can speed up the process of the wireframing itself. It's clearly, I see some of the tools that come in, looks to be soon, that can just predict what you're gonna do with your wireframe, and it just can do this upfront, so you can spend some of the time. And I think these tools can evolve in future and just reduce the amount of the I would say dirty work that you do while you prototyping. I think it's also going to make a solid step into UI art area, because I also did some experiments with Midjourney. So just when you can generate some art assets and then use them for UI art. It seems to be solid tool already. If you have some knowledge of Photoshop, you can already use that. And you can set a good UI art direction using AI already. But I think in the next steps, what might happen is that AI can start generating UI art based on the wireframe. So you kind of create the wireframe and then UI art generated based on that. This is something that I think might happen in the next few years. But when it comes to the UX as the like as a job as a whole, I think one of the biggest challenges right now for the AI is the way how the what kind of types of the information you can feed to the AI, so then it can analyze this. Like, for example, right now we can type the text to ChatGPT. We can also, I think, to Bart, Google, you can send the images, so it can also kind of work around that. But now imagine that you need to feed to the AI like all types of the information. It could be like 20 pages Word document, and then there is a PowerPoint goes after that, and then there is someone just verbally telling you what they want to achieve. Like all this type of the information that you get when you work with the team, like with all these inputs, it's just really hard to standardize them and then make sense of them. I think like this is one of the challenges that any designer has, is just to collect the information and make sense of this information. So this, I don't expect this happen really soon. I think we can be safe for like solid amount of time for now and see what will be next.
Okay, thanks for the positive prediction. Yeah, so well, that's cool. That all makes sense. And well, thanks again for an awesome talk. And yeah, we hope to see you soon in our other conferences. So yeah, hope you are
Great.
having a nice one.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Bye.
yeah, sure. Bye bye.